Welcome to the Insura-Preneur podcast, where we decode the secrets of organic growth and peak valuation for insurance entrepreneurs. Hi, I'm Michael Jans, founder of Insurance Profit Systems, Agency Revolution, and most recently, the Society of Insura-Preneurs, where our promise is if you own it, we'll help you grow it. Whether I'm sharing key insights or speaking with innovators who are reshaping our industry, you'll discover proven strategies in each podcast for the perfect insurance trifecta: maximum growth, superior margins, and peak valuation. This is a little bit of a two-part podcast. I'm sharing with you the audio version of a webinar that I delivered to agency owners, along with my friend and colleague, and my trusted advisor, Michael Mensch. Michael is the CEO and founding partner of Agency Brokerage Consultants, a leading M&A advisory firm specializing in the insurance industry. He holds certifications as a certified business intermediary and a merger and acquisition master intermediary. Michael has been involved in over 500 M&A transactions and more than 2,500 valuations for insurance agencies and brokerages nationwide, making him one of the most experienced deal makers in the insurance sector. He's also generally my Mr. Go-To when it comes to questions about what's happening in the agency acquisition field and what are the trends. So the two parts of this podcast: first, a relatively short conversation between Michael and myself about what some of those trends are. This is really interesting for those of you who own agencies. Pay attention to that. And then we move into part two, where I walk through the 5 steps required to achieve peak valuation, and between now and when you actually sell, what you need to do, the decisions that you need to make in order to get that peak valuation and enjoy maximum growth and maximum margins. So without further ado, it is a privilege of mine to welcome you to this conversation between Mike Mensch and myself. Thank you.
Hey there, hi there, ho there. This is Michael Jans. I am, I guess, among other things, I've been in the industry for a while, founder of the Society of Insura-Preneurs. Our purpose and our mission is to help agency principals who want to grow faster, create higher margins, and ultimately achieve peak valuation. So without much further ado, I will also introduce my dear friend and colleague, Mike Mensch, who in the M&A world is my Mr. Go-To guy. I trust his insights and his professional advice without qualification or equivocation, and recommend him personally to my clients. I asked Mike to join us briefly on this conversation. He'll be here for the beginning. As I've said to Mike, he doesn't need to stay because I'm going to ask him a few questions about what's happening now with valuations, because it is interesting. It's always interesting, but it seems to be particularly interesting right now. And I also want to make very, very clear, if those of you in the audience, if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to either raise your hand or throw something into the chat box, and love to take your questions. So, Mike Mensch, greetings. How are you?
Wonderful.
Mike is the president, I think, of Agency Brokerage Consultants, or CEO.
CEO.
Can't keep track of your exalted titles. How are you?
Very good.
Okay.
Always good to see you.
Yeah. So, Mike, you were mentioning how a shared client feels that you have changed their life, but also you've influenced my business philosophy and my business thinking as well. Interestingly, I've been in the industry for quite a long time. I've been advising agents on growth for at least 27 years. And during the course of that time, I have witnessed a number of my own clients sell their agency. And in watching them go through that process, it occurred to me, that's a really big payday. And for an insurapreneur who owns their business, thinking strategically and making the appropriate decisions about valuation and about their exit plan really, really do matter. And interestingly, they really line up really well with growth, which has been my bailiwick, and increased margins. And so we have three things. I call it the insurance trifecta: faster growth, higher margins, and peak valuations that really line up. So Mike's influence on my thinking and my working with my clients has really introduced many of the principles of achieving peak valuation. So kudos to you and thank you for that. Let's take a moment and talk about valuation. We've had this conversation for years, and it seems that, once or twice a year, we'll have a kind of serious conversation about what's going on with valuation. And it does change. It seems to be influenced by macroeconomic forces over which we don't have control, industry appetites, and so on and so forth, the cost of money. And sometimes who happens to be in the White House. And so it's a little bit of it's a very fluid part of the industry. So I'll throw that one at you. What is happening these days in the world of valuation? What are you seeing? What are people telling you?
We're as you know, we're an M&A advisor, so it's our job to interact in the marketplace, and the marketplace is always changing. If you roll back 10 years ago, there was a couple of private equity-backed insurance brokers. Now there's over 40 of them in the space. And it's really the last maybe 7 years, 5 years, really 5 years, everything heated up. And it peaked out in 2021 because we hit COVID. And in response to COVID, the government issued all this stimulus money and they cut interest rates and everything. So all that, the low interest rate environment really just fired everything up. And so valuations went up, the competition went up. And then, it's still a relatively new world for private equity. There's some that have been playing in the space a long time, but there's a lot of them that recently got into it. So it's been a learning process even for these private equity roll-ups. And so what we saw was 2021 was just a madhouse, so much activity. I think there's over 1,000, maybe even 1,200 publicly announced acquisitions. And then you get into the next year where they start to learn. And in the early 2022, the message was, okay, we're not just buying revenue anymore. We want to be a little more strategic about it, because up to that point, they were just aggregating revenue. And so then they started targeting specialty firms a little bit higher. This was quite a few of them. And so that was 2022. It was kind of a pivot to a little more specialization. And then 2023, last year, we had a really hard market, as everybody knows. The personal lines was just taking a beating. And so a lot of the private equity firms said, we really want to pull back on personal lines. So the message was, we're really looking for commercial agencies, or at least agencies that are a little heavier in commercial lines. But around the same time as when the interest rates went up, so there's always multiple dynamics. So you had the interest rates, you had the hard market, and what happened in response to the interest rates is these companies that are carrying billions of dollars in debt all of a sudden get squeezed on the rate. And so you saw a couple of the firms go from making 50 to 100 acquisitions down to like a handful of acquisitions the next year. And so what we're seeing today is they've all evolved. They're dealing with a different environment. And whereas the deals a couple of years ago, high multiples, all cash at closing, and then they would just incentivize the owner with a growth-based earnout. Now, a lot of these private equity firms are really pushing for the owners to roll equity. So you get something, let's say 80% cash at closing, you're going to roll over 20% in shares of the buyer. And that's kind of been a post-high interest rate pivot, because then the owner is more engaged. One, it's less debt that they're leveraging, because if they're coming to the table with 8 times EBITDA in cash instead of 10 times EBITDA in cash, it's less debt. They're also keeping the owner on board, so that way they are able to retain business and continue growth. And then the newest thing right now is they're all saying, oh, we're really looking for firms with double-digit growth. And it's like, okay, good luck. You know, how you going to hit your goals of spending as much money as you want and focus on just ones that have double digit growth. So it's constantly changing because all the variables around it, the interest rate, the government, you know, the hard market, the natural disasters, everything's always kind of affecting the market and causing these buyers to pivot a bit.
Okay, so bottom line, yeah, what are like the two or three big things out of
Yeah, I
your
mean, so the
observation?
multiples are still in theory the same or comparable, but if you're looking at selling, you're going to have to expect the buyer's going to be pushing for equity, which means they're going to want you to stick around for somewhere between 2 and 5 years at least after the deal. And you know, if you really want to get the max value, you should exit when you're growing and ideally, you know, hitting that double digit growth because that's what they're all targeting and that's how you're going to get the highest valuation.
Right on. Okay. Well, I will ask if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I did see that recently Reagan Consulting reported that the Q3 year-over-year growth in the industry was, you know, for agencies was 9.4%. I don't think I've ever seen that before, that high. I mean, typically it's like sneaking in around 4.6%.
You go back 12 years ago and flat, we used to say flat's the new up, right? Because
that's the new up.
14 years ago is.
Yeah. So, and clearly, I don't think everybody all of a sudden became better marketers, and I don't think we got 9.4 new customers that fell out of the air. And so clearly, we're all sort of supported by rate premium growth. So it could be artificial. I'm not in a position. I don't know if you've got any observations about that. I'm not in a position to predict the market swing. Do you have any? What does your magic 8-ball say about that?
Well, we've all, everybody, even in my seat, we've all enjoyed this nice ride of premiums going up. We've got clients that are in really, really hard markets where their revenues have tripled in like 4 years as a result. The buyers are becoming more aware that it's going to come down, and they're taking a closer look at some of those specialties where the premiums have really skyrocketed and getting a little more conservative. I think it's going to soften. Obviously, we can't stay on this trajectory forever, but it's been a nice ride for sure.
Okay, so your word to the wise is to exit when you're still in a growth phase. Yes. And my observation about that is always be in a growth phase. but clearly, if a buyer is looking at, let's say, you know, two agencies and everything about them is the same, except one's growing at 5% and one's growing at 20%, obviously the one that's on a growth cycle is going to be worth more and are going to be able to command more.
I mean, it affects the value multiple. It also affects whether or not you get buyers to the table. If you're shrinking, that's going to eliminate a lot of the buyers because they're really looking for firms that have growth. Because when you're carrying billions of dollars of debt, you can't go backwards in revenue, and that's what their biggest concern is.
Well, and I think you'd indicated that some of the private equity firms have negative organic growth. You know, when they right?
There was a really big announced deal this week, Assured Partners. And I was shocked at the multiple they received from Gallagher. And there's only a couple of things that make sense, and one of which is Assured Partners must have had really bad organic growth.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. So, word to the wise, everybody. Keep growing. All right, Mike. I'm going to do a screen share and present the other part of this presentation. If anybody has any questions for Mike, I told him Mike doesn't need to hang around. He knows what I'm all about. So he's going to probably disappear, but if anybody has any questions, now's the time. Meanwhile, I'm going to share my whole screen so you'll see whatever is ugly. Q&A. Okay. So here is a question from Rich. What multiples are you talking about? So it's always a range. What are we seeing these days?
It depends on a lot of factors.
Yeah.
And so that's not an easy, I'm not trying to be evasive in that answer. I mean, we've got clients that are selling for 11 times EBITDA, and we've got deals that have gone for north of 5 times revenue, some north of 6 times revenue. There's a lot of variables. If you want like an average, you got to look at the revenue size makes a difference. What lines of business, whether it's personal lines, commercial, specialty, it's really not an easy answer to just throw off the cuff. It's like someone calling in and say, "Hey, my house is this big. Like, what's my premium going to be?" I always try to use that as an analogy. It's not an easy answer. I mean, I'll just say from the perspective of where the market is today, the multiples are similar to where they have been. It's just the deal terms have changed. But I mean, our average clients are getting 9 to 11 times EBITDA, 9 to probably
Yeah.
9, 10 times EBITDA, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, but the difference between 9 and 11 is really fairly substantial, right? Or the difference between 8 if you're being penalized and 12 if you're being rewarded is dramatic.
Right.
So again, keep growing, get bigger, keep your margins up. All right. So I'm going to get into some of the details here. I think that's all the questions that we have for you right now. So also, folks, I'm willing to go past the hour. So I will stay on, and you can fire questions at me during the course of my presentation. I might miss them, but what I promise is that when I'm done with my presentation, it can be open season on Michael. All right. So there you go. All righty. Mike, thanks so much, and we'll be in touch with you soon.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Indeed. All righty. So I'm going to do a screen share, and hopefully everybody's looking at my screen. Adrian, if you want to hop on Slack just to make sure I'm showing the 5-step Insura-Preneur blueprint. I'm going to walk through the pathway. Boom. I'm going to walk through a blueprint or a path and plan that delivers on what I call the insurance trifecta. And the trifecta is faster growth, higher margins, and ultimately peak valuation. And I've designed this, well, I'm just going to dive into this right now. Typically, these are the problems that I am inclined to run into when I accept a new client or I'm speaking with somebody about our services. Is one, slow to mediocre growth. Number two, confusion about modern marketing. I certainly understand that. It's changing constantly. It's a very different world than it was 15 or 20 years ago. You're very likely not advertising in the yellow pages is your primary source of new business. Unrealized valuation is a big problem. Most agents are not on the right track to achieve the highest valuation that they could get because they're just missing a few key decisions and then not having a clear path and plan. It's so easy for an agency principal to come into the agency and sort of take care of business and do whatever they do. And Tuesday becomes Wednesday, and Wednesday becomes Thursday, and January becomes February, and 1 year becomes the next, and time flies by without just ultimately settling in and focusing in on a few key decisions. My mantra is that the decisions you make now determine the valuation you get later. And so I'm going to review what many of those critical decisions are. So my solution is based on having worked with Insura-Preneurs for a long time and entrepreneurs from outside the industry as well, and of course being one. For those of you who don't know me, I should introduce myself. I am I'm a serial entrepreneur in the insurance industry. I was the founder of Insurance Profit Systems. the largest marketing advisory service serving insurance agency principals, independent agency principals. I was the founder and CEO of Agency Revolution, which has become the leading marketing automation digital platform in the industry, and a bunch of other businesses that have affected the industry one way or another. So I've been around the block as an entrepreneur. And so my blueprint is based on literally 27 years of advising independent insurance agency principals on the insurance trifecta. Of course, my own experience and frankly, learning from many of the best agents in the United States and Canada. And so I am at a position now in my career where I know that at some point I will be bringing down my shingle. I won't be doing this forever. I'm warning my clients that their access to me is probably diminishing, and at some point it will be gone. And so what I've attempted to do in the past year is really reflect on the most important lessons that I've learned from my mentors and coaches, the most important lessons I've learned working with fast growth agents, both in personal lines, commercial lines, Main Street agencies, rural, suburban, urban. I've worked with thousands of agencies over the years, and I've attempted to analyze it, categorize it, and then package it in a way that's easy to consume so you can just follow the steps. And during the one thing that I think I've maintained throughout those years, while other endeavors have come and gone, is I've continued to work with a mastermind group, a small cadre of agents who are serious about their own growth and committed to one another's success. And many of them are, perhaps famous in the industry for their growth. So my blueprint is built upon 5 steps. And I will dig into these in a little bit of detail, and then I'll take any questions that you want. Number 1, it's gaining clarity on your strategic horizon. And what I mean by that is the number of years between now and when you intend to sell. And I'll show you in a moment why that's so important. And then number 2, once we know what that horizon is, and that's important because the behavior of the agency needs to change as we approach the sale date. Number 2 is gaining clarity on your growth model. One way that both Mike and I present this is 3 models: sales-driven, marketing-driven, and blended or hybrid. There are pros and cons to each one. There tends to be a different profitability range for each one. And so getting clarity on the growth model is really important. And then once you have it, managing within reasonably close to best practices is wise and prudent, because that will help you achieve the best margins, allow you to redirect resources to growth, and then ultimately get peak valuation. And then we really start getting the rubber on the road, building a growth plan. And I build it around what I call the 4 tributaries of income: referrals, retention, revenue, and client acquisition. And now we're ready to be in the marketplace. And so we create a marketing plan, and I'll show you the way that we keep our finger on the pulse and make sure that it's alive, and like a really living document, a breathing organ, so to speak, in your agency, built on the 4 stages of the ACOR insurance marketing process. How do we attract? It's an ACOR is an acronym: attract, convert, optimize, and retain. How do we attract people into your marketing funnel so you have good, high quality leads? How do you convert them at the highest possible closing rate? How do you optimize then those new relationships so you have multiple policies per customer and the highest revenue per customer? And then how do you retain them as long as possible? So we'll dive into that. And then before we're done, I'll talk to you about cracking the code on one of the most difficult, challenging issues that a lot of agency principals feel, which is if we go through those first 4 steps, most people say, I totally get that, but I don't know how to actually create content. I don't know actually how to say something to the marketplace that earns their trust and their respect and deals and positions us with integrity in the marketplace in such a way that we are the signal above the noise, in such a way that we are the obvious agency. So my promise and my purpose is what I call the rule of 50. The rule, and this is my iteration on a term that comes from the private equity world, the rule of 40. I sold the private equity. I sold Agency Rev to private equity. And they like to see the rule of 40. For my clients, I figure, why just hit the rule of 40? Hit the rule of 50. Okay, so my rule of 50 is what happens when you take your EBITDA percentage as a percentage of your revenue, your growth rate, add them together, and then boom, what's the number? Well, if your EBIT is 30 and your growth rate is 20, then you hit it, your rule of 50. The percentages, the ratio of those two numbers might change over time, but if you're able to hit rule of 50, you will, like Mike said, you'll get buyers to the table. And then once they're at the table, you'll be in a position to demand a very respectable valuation. Does it work? Okay. Without being redundant, I'm only going to take a moment on this, but I've been at this game for a long time and I've learned how to win with my clients. This is what some of them have said. Mike Matheson, we were a $6 million agency back then. Today we're pushing $120 million in premium. You can't argue with that kind of success, and I credit most of it to Michael Jans. We've grown 41% in the last 2 years, 268% since meeting Michael Jans. We've allowed him to secure the capital, both in terms of financial and human capital, to acquire multiple agencies. That was Matt Davis in California. Lee Hendry said, your systems have enabled me to take 26 weeks off and still grow my agency by over $400,000 in commissions every year. In Oregon, Rex LeSueur said, our agency's grown 625% since the day I met Michael. Without his help, that never would have happened. So I just want to give you confidence that what I'm sharing with you is a system that genuinely works. So number one, in the Mike Mensch world, he shows up in somebody's life around here at the end of stage 3. I have divided the life of an Insura-Preneur, the career, into 4 chunks because the behavior of the principal and the behavior of the agency, it has to change as it moves through these 4 stages. Stage 1 is when you're 10 years out or more. Your primary objective there is growth, growth, growth. A buyer 10 years or more later is not going to look back at 10-year-old financials and really care that much about them. They might look at the last 3 to 5, but they're not going to look at 10. What you want to do is get as big as you possibly can. Obviously, margins matter so that you can build some personal wealth, so you can take care of your expenses, your personal expenses, and have the lifestyle that you choose, perhaps so that you can allocate some of those resources and make an acquisition. So it matters, but your primary imperative is 1, growth, 2, growth, 3, growth. Now, when you get to stage 2, you're 5 to 10 years out, you have to.
This episode is brought to you by the Society of Insura-Preneurs, guiding owners to the insurance trifecta of faster growth, higher margins, and peak valuation. If you want a clear and reliable roadmap to growth, download our free 5-step 30% growth blueprint at www.insura-preneur.com with a dash in the middle. It's the same system that's helped agencies double, triple, and even 10x in size, and it's yours free. Visit Insura-Preneur.com.
Start leaning. You have to start polishing the apple so it begins to look like the agency that you want to sell. And so, yes, as Mike mentioned, you still want to be in a growth cycle, but you also want to make sure now the agency is built upon systems, not upon the manual labor of the agency principal. That's really important. If the agency principal is, for example, a big rainmaker or responsible for critical customer relationships, that could really potentially penalize your valuation. And you want to make sure you're preparing for stage 3. So you want to make sure that your income and expense are in appropriate relationship to each other and you've got the right kind of EBITDA. Now we get to stage 3, where we're less than 5 years out. Yeah, ultimately the big driver is EBITDA, but also make sure you're in a growth pattern, and really make sure that the agency is built upon systems. And then boom, we sell. And as Mike mentioned, you might be around for a while afterwards. So you want to make sure you understand the contract and really control the levers that deploy the bonuses that are generally built into a contract. So, boom, number one, that is number one, is understanding where you are in the 4 stages of the Insura-Preneur based on your strategic horizon. And I'm going to give you a very quick overview of what I call the valuation pyramid. At the tippy top, we know EBITDA is the driver, but also, and this can be in like Mike had said, it seems to be even rising in importance. Continued track record of growth and built upon systems. Don't penalize your valuation by being a producer or a worker as opposed to a leader. Now, what is it that is going to push that top of the pyramid up? Number one, so I'm gonna do a quick profile on these. Number one, optimal cost of the acquisition of customers. And that comes from having customer acquisition systems, monitoring them, monitoring the numbers, being a good marketer, and being able to appropriately adjust your investment into customer acquisition systems, number one. And then once you've got customers, ideally achieving MCLV, maximum customer lifetime value. So you've got systems in place that optimize and retain clients. So underneath those two, in a similar color, so you know that they're related, is ACOR, breaking your marketing down into systems that attract, systems that convert, systems that optimize, and systems that retain. Other things that are important are, as Mike mentioned, preferred lines of business, being absolutely clear on your ideal customer profile, and ideally niches. Valuation partners acquisition partners like niches. So do I, and so do you. Here's why. They deliver 2 really powerful forces. One, external. A niche allows you to do niche marketing. And so you can create a powerful message that resonates with a lot of people that have a common interest. And so you can grow fast. And then internally, if you're servicing and closing deals on a niche over and over again, generally you can do that in a compressed period of time, and you refine and perfect the steps. And so you can reduce your margins. So you grow faster, boom, top line goes up, margins go down. It's an ideal situation. You want to make sure you have good clients. So you've got A clients, B clients, C clients. In the real world, generally the A clients are the ones who are delivering the greatest bulk of your profitability. Your B clients are probably perhaps break even, and your C clients are reducing the profitability. So making sure you're going through a good grid, a good filter to always have profitable clients, and moving as many of your Bs up to A as you possibly can, and then considering if the Cs can move up or whether they should move out. Optimizing location matters. And that doesn't mean that there's necessarily a bad location, but obviously, if you're in an urban area where there's high population density and it's a socioeconomically high, then that's really favorable. However, I've got clients. I can think of one now in a very small town surrounded by national forest on three sides with a low socioeconomic standard of living. But they've optimized their location by making it very almost irrelevant, because now they're niche players and they're in 23 different states, and they are the number one niche player in two niches. Okay. Also, being attentive to appropriate relationship of carrier relations, a balance of carriers, optimizing your tech stack so that you're multiplying your reach on the outside and minimizing the cost on the inside, and making sure that you are cleaning up any messy third-party contracts. It's not that they add, but often, like Mike will run into sloppy contracts, and they tend to reduce your valuation. So again, I can take questions when we're done, but I got to move on. So boom, number one. So now we know, okay, based on where I am as an owner, I know what I need to focus on. And now we have to choose our growth model. And as Mike or I mentioned, there are three common growth models. Sales driven, basically where we send producers out to the world and they bring contracts back. And generally they're responsible for getting their own, in most cases, getting their own leads and their own appointments and closing the deal and probably participating in the renewal, et cetera. Marketing driven, where we don't send out producers. Ideally, we send out content. We send out thought leadership that resonates with the marketplace and encourages them to respond, so they come, and then we close them in-house. And then blended, where we generally have both. Okay. Key principles. Now, what is it that drives your strategic decision about your growth model? Because it's really important. Number one, it's what's the growth model. It's choosing your ideal client profile and then determining what's the growth model I need to get to dominate that market. Generally speaking, the industry has indicated that the sales model is better for commercial lines above a certain level, mid-market commercial lines or, larger commercial lines. Fair enough. And one of the advantages is it's a well-known model. You don't need to learn the skills of marketing. However, that being said, I have clients who regularly, routinely sell six-figure premium accounts and have never had a producer. They close them in-house. So the world of marketing is really beginning to bust through many of the barriers of sort of traditional industry behavior. Mike, in previous conversations, has indicated that most marketing-driven agencies are, they tend to top out around $2 million in revenue. And I think we're going to begin to see that change. I know we're already seeing it change. I'm seeing it change with my clients, where we can, and I think the reason that that's true is because they have tended to be quote unquote Main Street agencies, and the marketing is what I would call passive marketing. It's kind of community marketing, and they're not marketing masters, so to speak. So, boom. I think we're beginning to see something change there. The other change that we're seeing is that in the sales-driven model, we're seeing more and more agencies combine marketing and sales. So the producer is not on their own going out, like having to do the slow manual labor of prospecting. The agency can support them and generate leads with high quality marketing and really help them go dominate the market. So the tools that we have available for that. Number one, this one's important, and I'm going to show this one to you. Selecting your customer is one of the most important decisions that an agency can ever make. And my observation is that it's been sloppy, chaotic, and haphazard. That many agents are sort of have a client profile accidentally. And then 10 years later, they realize, oh yeah, we're pretty good at that. And so if we're going to graph this out mathematically, it would be, I'd show a chart where like the best client for your agency could put you on a growth trend line, like going up really fast. And the second or third or fourth best, it can go up, but not as fast. And if you play that out over 10 years, the delta, the gap between best choice and second or third best choice gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I encourage my clients to take this seriously, and I ask them to review 9 filters or considerations, and I'll just share with you really quickly what they are. Number one, is there a favorable income to service ratio? You know that there's some niches that require a lot of service and some niches that don't. Okay, service is expensive. There's some lines of business that lean toward high retention. That will help you get maximum customer lifetime value. I spoke with a new mastermind member yesterday who's going into a niche that's seeing some chaos because the primary carrier is beginning to non-renew a lot of their clients, and he has at least 2 carriers that are willing to come in and compete against them. And so he's got a little bit of a blue ocean opportunity. That's an advantage. Niches that are at a growth cycle. I'm a big fan of niches, but you should be aware of the fact that every industry cycles. So, some niches, you just know they're going to grow for years and years and years, and some niches are going to be cyclical. For example, contractors can be cyclical. I had a client who, before they came to me, they were totally fully invested in the contractors niche with nothing else. And then when the recession hit back in 2008, they lost $1 million in premium, and it was a really, really stressful time. So if you've got a cyclical niche, you need to consider the possibility of diversification, so you've got some balance to that. If it's up market, both in price and complexity, that tends to be an advantage. If you happen to have unusual or attractive product opportunities, use those to your advantage. Obviously, if you're going to be in this business, personal passion for the niche matters. It will help you, give you staying power. Agency expertise in the niche matters. Now, you can develop it quickly, but you've got to make a commitment to it. The market wants to know you. They want to feel you know me. They want to feel that you understand. You understand my pain. Okay, and then ideally, you've got some satisfied customers that are in your book because they'll be available for you for case studies and testimonials that'll help you launch the growth of that niche. So, boom. And then I've got to do this one quickly. The growth model analyzer. Let's take a look at this. That's the agency growth planner. Let me show you a growth model analyzer. Okay, so we have a tool. Looks like this. So not only do you want to select your growth model, but you want to manage it appropriately. So you want to make sure you're within reasonable parameters on the execution of it. So this tool is very simple. You put your revenue there, and then your bookkeeper can throw in the major expense lines here. Boom, we have an agency with a 34% net profitability. It's a marketing-driven agency. Guess what? That's kind of on the low profitability side of things. Why is that? Oh, well, here are the 2 things that really that popped out to me as variances that they should be aware of. Number 1, they're overstaffed. Boom. So they want to right size that. And number two, as a marketer, I'm concerned about the fact that they're actually underfunding their growth. So their profitability is probably acceptable to them, but it's low. And this would be an agency with a relatively low percentage based on their size, investment in marketing. That would explain why they, in this case, it's a sample agency, but they likely would be having a lower growth rate. So now if we have figured out where we are in the strategic horizon, we've determined what our growth model is. Now we need a growth plan. How are we going to grow? Well, there are four tributaries of income, and I'm setting contingencies aside because tends to be somewhat out of our control. But let's talk about the money that comes from customers. Four tributaries: referrals, retention, revenue per customer, and client acquisition. So I'm going to show you one way that we think about that. How do we do that? So let's take a look at an agency growth planner, and boom, here we are. All right, so here's an agency, $3 million agency with 3,500 customers, 88% retention, and they have, so this is automatically calculated, their revenue per client's $857. Now, this tool allows us to think through, oh, I say I want to grow 20% or I want to grow 30%. Well, let's begin to set some objectives on how we do that. What are the systems that we need to install to help us do that? So I look at the four tributaries. Safeco had indicated that the average agency, Safeco and Liberty, they analyze and review their agency force roughly annually. And they determined that the average agency generates one referral per 700 clients per month. But when they install a reasonably well-run referral program, they double that to one per 350 per month. But they have also identified an entire tier of agencies that generate a really stunning one referral per 100 clients per month. So let's use this tool to, let's go from passive to a, we've actually installed a referral program. Cool. So here we boosted retention from 88 to 92. Cool. Revenue per client. How do we do that? Well, number one, we pick better customers. Number two, we run thoughtful cross-sell campaigns throughout the year, and we make sure that we're genuinely offering people an opportunity to protect themselves better. Number three, we train the service team to turn every service call into a money call. Number four, we run like a true business system, an annual review campaign on as many clients as we can every single year. And then number five, we survive the hard market and we do it strategically. Okay. And then now, so let's say that this was an agency that typically, let's say it grew 10%. Well, they lost 12% and grew 10%. So we know that they already can acquire 22% in new customers. So let's boost this up a little bit. All right, let's take them up to 25%. And so boom, so now we have an agency that's, what did we do? We installed a referral program. We boosted their retention. We boosted revenue per client by 5 points. Seriously, in the hard market, this is a piece of cake. And we went from 22% new client growth, because they lost 10, to 25. So, boom, they need 875 new clients to do that. How are they going to get 875 new clients? Well, let's say their closing ratio is 50%. For the fun of it, that means they need 1,750 leads during the course of the year, 7 leads a day, if that's possible, okay? Boom. And based on a 75% closing rate from their referrals, they're going to get 90 customers coming in at an average of $857. So from referrals. So bada bing, bada boom. This is something that I encourage my clients to look at once a month, every month. They've established certain objectives. Are they hitting the objectives or not? This is sort of kind of business 101, but frankly, most agents don't do it. And if you do it, you're ahead of 80, 90% of the competition. So now we want to jump into the marketplace. Most agents, admittedly, most agency principals are trained in insurance and maybe trained in business management, but not necessarily trained in marketing. And so what I attempt to do is to offer a model so that they can think clearly about their marketing, so that they can engineer it and understand it. We do that by dividing it into 4 basic systems and stepping back and looking at what do we do to attract leads into our marketing funnel? How many leads do we get? What are we doing to make sure we have the maximum conversion that we can get? What are we doing to optimize those new clients, those buyers that we just converted? So how do we get as many policies per customer as we possibly can? And what are we doing to earn the trust and the respect and the loyalty of our clients so that they stay with us forever? How do we develop highly loyal insurance clients? Bain and Company had in their research on our industry indicated that highly loyal insurance clients, those that give you a 9 or a 10, they renew at 97%, they buy 25% more insurance, and they give 2.5 times more referrals than the 7s or 8s. And of course, the 1s through 6s, basically, they don't give referrals, they give complaints, and they post about social media. So why have them? And then ideally, we're creating loyal customers, turning them into promoters, and they generate leads for us because we've installed a referral program. So I encourage a couple of really critical things with my clients when it comes to marketing. One is just to understand the ACOR marketing process, and let's take a look at this. Once a month, reflect on this. Again, kind of business 101. We tend to look at the profit and loss statement, which is a really lagging indicator. It's a reflection. It's looking in the rear view mirror about what happened before, what happened, last month, and usually the things that happened before last month that drove last month's P&L statement. What are the drivers? What are the, kind of lean toward leading indicators? Well, there are 4 numbers that really drive your organic growth. How many leads did you get? How many did you convert? How many, what's your policy per customer count, and what's your rolling 12-month retention? So we review the entire ACOR model. And then once a month to reflect on what's working, what's not, and what can we do to improve? What's working, what's not, and what can we do to improve? So that's just a tool that we use to basically, I think I don't know if it was in that testimonial or that quote from Mike Matheson, but basically he said, ACOR changed my life. So learning to think like a marketer is a game changer for most agents. And then, like we talked about earlier, acquisition partners like niches, and for the same reason I like niches, because they deliver faster growth and they tend to deliver the magic of lower margins or higher margins and lower expenses. And so I have designed a formula for dominating a niche, and I'll share with you, very quickly what that is. Number 1, if you have a niche and it specializes in a market, you should name the insurance program. Why? When you name something, it becomes a thing in the mind of those people who hear the name. So, in other words, if you market to churches in Pennsylvania and you've got the church, the Pennsylvania Church Insurance Program, pretty simple name. It's one of I call that the classic formula. I've got 2 basic formula for naming an insurance program. Boom. They automatically know that you're their guy and everybody else is such and such insurance agency, but this is a program that specializes in me. So I've got 2 formula, the classic formula and what I call the portmanteau formula. So if you got questions, we can take them later. And creating a proprietary process. The average prospect doesn't really understand what you do. They talk to you, and then you come back later and you give them a proposal, and that's about as much as they understand. But if you can show them the sequence that takes them from the problem that they have, which is getting the protection they need at a price that's acceptable to them, if you can show them the process, it gives them confidence that you know what you're doing for them. And then we want to create a unique selling proposition. How do we do that? We have to answer the question, why should I do business with you above any and all other options? And I've got a sequence of steps that help people do that. And then ultimately provide an irresistible offer. The unique selling proposition has staying power. It usually lasts for years, but offers, or what marketers call an irresistible offer, those could be tested and those could be changed as quickly as you need to. And then ideally, you've got some lead magnets. You've got actual content that people want that solves problems for them. You can notify. So you want to be able to build a list. What are the greatest values? What are the most important assets in the agency? I mean, yes, the Insura-Preneur, the principal, big asset. The team, big asset, but also your lists, your customer list, obviously the most valuable asset. But you've also got other lists that you can develop. From a marketer's point of view, those are gold. So you want to be able to develop lists, and you want to know how to maintain your lists, and then tell the list you've got some great content. You might drive them to a landing page. So we've got a tool to help you generate a landing page, and then run an email campaign. Email is magic. And then, boom, ideally, leads start coming in. You want to get the highest conversion off of those leads you possibly can. I do want to respect your time. I'm willing to stay past the top of the hour. I have I'll show anything that you want me to show you. But yeah, all of these tools are available for download for my clients, and I'm more than happy to share with you ultimately, the marketing essence behind the magic that makes them work. As I said earlier, for years, as I've presented this series of steps, most people say, I get it. This it totally works. I go from the strategic and I begin to move to the tactical, and where everything gets stuck is that tactical step of I don't know actually how to create content. I don't know how to write an email campaign. I don't know how to write a lead magnet. I don't know how to write a checklist. I don't know so on and so forth. I don't know the best way to script a podcast, et cetera, et cetera. So we have cracked that code. It is built on a fundamental principle, and that is, one, the money's in the relationship. And in our business, we're looking for long-term relationships that are built, I call it the trifactor, TRI, built on trust, respect, and integrity. That's how you're going to be the signal above the noise, because in any marketplace you go into, the internet is talking and making confusion and noise, and you want to be the one that that's the person that I want to pay attention to. So I have two sets of tools. There's only so much I can share with this right now. One is what I call the Thought Leadership Marketing Toolkit. And this is really based on what I call the 4M building blocks of thought leadership marketing. One, getting crystal clear on who your market is. We already talked about that. Number two, developing a message that makes you the signal above the noise. Number three, this is often overlooked, clarifying the aspects of you, the messenger that you want to deliver to the marketplace so that you stand out from the crowd and that they want to follow you. Boom, you become a market leader. That's what a thought leader is all about. And then ultimately selecting usually not just one, but a handful of media through which you can communicate to that marketplace. And then, boom, kind of the magic that we started bringing in roughly 2 years ago was the appropriate use of artificial intelligence, and I call this the chat sandwich. Okay, the sandwich. It can be like a club sandwich, and what I mean by that is it's layers. First, there's human input, and that is the quality of the prompt is. That's at least 80% of the game. Sloppy prompts, lazy prompts, amateur prompts deliver sloppy, lazy, and amateur results. So high quality prompt, and then the next layer is the response from chat, whichever AI you use, and then boom, human intervention again to refine it. Probably go back to chat again, and then human intervention again until you finally get something, because you ultimately have to own the quality of your content. So I've created a series of very refined, kind of advanced prompts to do everything from gaining a deeper understanding of the marketplace itself, gaining a deeper understanding of their pains, both in insurance and not in insurance, so you can market to them top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. Prompts to help you name your insurance program. I mean, you can see some of these are fairly substantial prompts. They're not, like write down the first two sentences that come to the top of your head. Prompts to create a proprietary process for your insurance program, prompts to create a unique selling proposition, and so on and so forth. So there is one other this is a sort of a really important, I'm calling it a bonus step to number 6, which is what I call a monthly growth ritual. So I've alluded to this throughout this. It's not enough just to put all these things in place. Once a month, that's all. Maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half, boom, devoted to growth. What I encourage my clients to do, and I send them a tool. I think I've got, here's a copy of it. Is to reflect on where are they with the rule of 50. Boom. What's your EBITDA? What's your growth? What's your, what does that equal? Run the growth model analyzer and see whether or not there's significant variances. Your bookkeeper can give it to you. It won't take her 5 or 10 minutes. And then look at your growth plan. Are you getting the referrals that you want? What was the goal and what are you getting? Same with retention, revenue per customer, and new customers. With ACOR, how many leads did you get? What was your conversion rate? So reflect on what's working and what's not, and then just get very clear on your next steps so that every month is bigger than the last month.
Hi, Michael Jans again. And before we wrap up, let me share something that still inspires me to this day. One of our early Blueprint members, Lee Henry, showed the insurance world what is truly possible. He installed a system that allowed him to take 26 weeks off every year while growing his agency by $400,000 in commissions, not just for 1 year, but year after year after year. That's the power of working on your business, not just in it. If you're ready to transform your insurance business, and I think you are, if you're listening to this podcast, visit Insura-Preneur.com with a dash in the middle to get your copy of the 5-step blueprint for fast growth and peak valuation. This is the same system that's helped agencies grow from $6 million to $120 million or more in premium. Please don't let another day go by without exploring what's possible for your agency. Head to Insura-Preneur.com and download the blueprint. Meanwhile, keep challenging the status quo and don't just beat your own records, beat industry records. Build a business that gives you and your family the life of your dreams. This is Michael Jans, and you've been listening to the Insura-Preneur podcast. And remember, Insura-Preneur has a dash in the middle. So go dash there and get a copy of your blueprint. Talk to you soon.